Hey, good morning. Scott Luton, Greg White, back with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well, Scott. Thank you. I
Excellent.
am prepared.
Are you really?
Well,
Are you
I know
buckled up?
that sounds foreign to most people, but yes, I am prepared.
Well, we have, so today, on today's Standing Thursday live stream, we go live every Thursday at 12 noon. We've got one of our favorite all-time guests, a gentleman that I've been collaborating with for years. He's just like our audience. He always brings it. He's always on, and he's always real. And so our audience is in for a great treat with Fred Tolbert with Southeast Demand Solutions. Greg, looking forward to this, right?
I am. Fred and I used to compete against one another, arguably, back in the day, and he outlasted me. So,
wow, that's doing
right?
something.
Yeah.
Well,
that's okay.
Well,
thank you.
Our audience, folks, we've got the burning questions in supply chain. So y'all stay tuned. We want to get y'all to weigh in as much as Fred and Greg is going to be tackling from our supply chains in disarray, our supply chains too lean. Can we forecast our way out of the pandemic and a lot
Don't give
more.
it all away, man.
Sorry, I'm letting the cat out of the bag. But everyone, folks, get ready to tune in because we want to hear from you. And we're going to say hello to a few folks before we get started. But really quick, I want to share. So, Greg, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect from the webinar we did this morning. I'm not sure what my expectations were. But holy cow, did Bob Slavin deliver, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. If you missed that, shame on you. But we recorded it. So good for you. And man, if you have any questions about IoT, about how it integrates in your organization or what you can do with it, I mean, even I learned a lot about this.
Agreed.
And it's much more broadly applicable than even I thought. So, first of all, he's an evangelist, so he's not trying to sell you anything. And that also means that he is deeply studied and really knowledgeable.
Yes, and genuine and passionate and so informed. Gosh. So the good news is this. You can go back and check out the replay. We'll have the replay posted on our YouTube channel in the next 48 hours or so. And if you're at all curious about what IoT is, where it's going, why it matters, check out this. In fact, Memory, who may not be with us on the live stream here today, said that it was the best IoT webinar she has seen.
So Pratik and Daria have already sounded off from India.
Outstanding.
So they're back for more. Super Thursday, says Daria.
Super Thursday. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Love the IoT webinar. Thank you for that, Daria. Super Thursday. We need to start embracing these hashtags. Good stuff there. But y'all check that out. And then secondly, of course, next week, the 2020 SAPICS virtual conference is joining us. Achieve Perfect 2020 Supply Chain Vision. Hashtag, not just another webinar. I love that. And Greg, what are we doing there?
Well, the most important thing is trivia. Well, maybe not the most important, but the most fun is trivia. We are going to bring trivia back. And we're also going to share some of our highly intellectual views on supply chain and share that with the group that joins us. So
yeah,
I'm excited about that. Right.
We are too.
It's going to be interesting to be on the other side of the mic, if that's what you say, but
right. I think it's the thing. And the good news is we make it easy. If y'all want to check that out and join in, it's open to members, non-members alike. We've got the link in the show notes, and we'd love to have you join us. All right, so let's say hello to a few folks, and then we're going to welcome in our favorite guest, Fred Tolbert. Want to say hello to, as we mentioned, Pratik is with us again. Good afternoon, all. Early today, had a great lecture on IoT by Bob. Totally fascinated. Equally excited for this episode. We are too, Pratik. So buckle up, get ready for the one and only Fred Tolbert.
Yeah.
We mentioned Daria. Robin is with us. Good day from the Netherlands. Great to have you here via LinkedIn, Robin. Thanks for joining us. And Michael Avra, who is always part of these live streams, was also part of the webinar this morning. He's chock full of knowledge. Michael, keep those articles coming. He's got a great eye for analysis, and he enjoyed the webinar this morning as well. Don Edward Long, is just a mountain, is with us. Hello, Don. I think I owe you a phone call. Hope this finds you well. And make sure you drop in the comments when the next charge up the mountain is here in the Metro Atlanta area.
Yes, I need to give me a couple days notice. I need to prepare my excuse.
All right. Well, with no further delay, I cannot wait to get into these questions with you and Fred and our audience. Let's bring in Fred Tolbert, principal with Southeast Demand Solutions. Hey, Fred, good afternoon.
Hello there, Scott and Greg. How are you guys doing?
Board.
Doing great. And, we've really been looking forward to this. This has been in the works for a while, and the rough and tumble 2020 that's been is delayed us just a smidge, but we're always a pleasure to collaborate with you, Fred.
Well, hey, it's good to be here with you guys. I always look forward to this. And, hey, I'm going to go off script here from the get-go. And congratulate you guys on 500 plus episodes now. What an achievement. It has really grown into something that, hey, you look forward to the Monday buzz and the different podcasts and live streams and all that. So I applaud you guys on a pretty much of a milestone event. So way to go, guys.
Thank you,
man.
Thank you so much, Fred. A little known fact, Greg, a lot of folks don't know is, long before we kicked off podcasts and live streams and before Supply Chain Now was ever a thing, we did a ton of webinars going back 10 years or more. And one of our earliest webinars, and certainly one of our biggest, especially at the time, was featuring Fred. And it was the 7 deadly sins of forecasting. Whoa. And it was a great session. We'll have to break that out again sometime soon. But I bring that up.
What do you want to bet that all 7 of those are still applicable, Fred?
Haven't changed in my career goes back a lot of years. The tools are better, but the fundamental causes of why companies have too much inventory and too poor service, frankly, haven't changed in decades.
Yeah. But it was well received as always. And I bring all that up beyond the fact that I really appreciate Fred and all the work the collaboration we've had over the years. But it starts with great content, real content, folks that have been there and done it and are willing to share and help others. And that's at the core of everything we've done, all 500 of those podcast episodes. So I appreciate you flipping the script a little bit, but even more, I appreciate you coming on and sharing with others to help them navigate these crazy times we live in. So let's say hello. A few other folks have joined us, Greg and Fred. I want to recognize we've got Tom Raftery with us, who came on and gave a great perspective on sustainability last week. We've got Davin, of course. You can't do a live stream without Davin. Yesterday, he joined us for Mike Griswold, and he said, bonus episode. Hey, we try to bring it every day. So hello to all of y'all. Glad that you're here. All right, so let's dive right in. And before we pose the burning questions, Greg, to you and Fred and the community here, let's make sure our audience, a couple that may have missed some of our previous shows with Fred, let's get them to know Fred Tolbert a little better. So, Fred, tell us what you do a bit, and then I want to talk about a recent initiative that you've kicked off that we really admire.
Well, and I am currently the Southeastern principal with Demand Solutions. We're supply chain planning software company, and I work with companies, I guess in the past, primarily in the Southeast, but things have changed a little bit. And I'm actually working with companies all over the country now, actually, but helping them to through the software evaluation process. And then I actually still have my fingers in the implementation projects from a project management, from an account management standpoint, but I also love doing process design and helping companies solve their particular issues. So some people may wish I would go away and get my hands out of the software, but I still enjoy doing that. I have loved that for all these years. And so, as long as they keep me around, I'll probably be in there giving them my 2 cents worth about how they ought to improve their demand planning, supply planning, and sales and operation planning processes.
Love it. And, the dialect, your accent, I'm picking up Minnesota in your accent. No, I'm kidding, of course.
I have an accent.
Where are you from originally, Fred?
I'm actually in Atlanta. There's been such an influx of people from other areas, but I'm actually relatively local. I'm from Jefferson, Georgia, which is about an hour outside northeast of Atlanta, up I-85. So I grew up in a very small town, but many years ago gravitated to the Atlanta area.
Outstanding. That I-85 northeast corridor that heads up into the upstate of South Carolina, that's become a plethora of logistics and fulfillment centers, and
No doubt.
there's a surprising amount of manufacturing up that corridor as well. But a lot of good stuff there, Fred. Great to have you. And let's see here. Sony is back with us from Nigeria, Greg. So hello, Sony.
Awesome.
Great to have you here via LinkedIn. All right. From Jefferson, Georgia to Nigeria. Hey, the global supply chain world. I love that.
Right.
All right. So Fred, one more thing before we ask you the burning questions and pose it to our audience as well. You're giving back, giving forward, as Greg has coined. Love it. You always have. I remember a charity event we did for a local association chapter way back when, and you're one of the first people that stepped up and donated and sponsored, which was so critical at the time. But now, fast forward all these years, you're giving back to the UGA, the University of Georgia Supply Chain Program, something you call Team Supply Chain. Tell us more.
Well, as University of Georgia is developing their supply chain program, and they have an alumni supply chain advisory board that now a couple of years ago I joined that advisory board, and I told the professors there, Marty and Professor Montgomery, that, hey, I would be interested in working with some students in a mentor type relationship, and it sort of has taken on a life of its own. I started out with just a couple of people, and then this year we have a team of 4 people that we meet a couple of times a month now in Zoom sessions, and we talk supply chain topics and different things. Where actually our next session is going to be on diversity in the workplace and what they can expect as they go out into the workplace. So it's a group of senior supply chain majors that have agreed to spend time with an old geezer and talk supply chain a little bit.
Well, Greg, we featured some of those folks, some of the students on an episode not too long ago, and we'll drop that in the comments. Greg, speak to what we heard as part of that episode.
Well, first of all, the future of supply chain is bright because every one of those young professionals was bright. And we've seen that so often. I mean, UGA has I would argue, fledgling supply chain school, just started in 2018, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And just graduated their first class in 2019, but an incredible program. And I mean, incredible industry and community participation, like Fred and like, all the big players in supply chain around town. So, what it spoke to me toward is that supply chain is going the right direction, and this inclination to make it more app-like is really the right direction to go. And this group of young professionals coming into the industry now, they're going to drive us that direction.
That's right.
I've had an opportunity. I talked with these folks, and I don't know what generation the kids are right now that are in college, or they Z, or what generation they are. And
Z.
Maybe they have they've maybe gotten some bad press a little bit, but boy, these folks are smart. They are dedicated. They are, no goofing off with this crowd.
I know where you wanted to go there. Yeah, I mean, they are purpose driven, right? I mean,
absolutely.
you could see it.
And it's interesting, my team, and it's just interesting how each seems to evolve into a particular area of supply chain. In our team now, we've got one that's in sort of internal consulting related, one process improvement that's their interest area, one more inventory management, and one in the transportation area. So they get exposed to the concepts, and something rings a bell with them, and they decide that's the area that they're most interested in. So it's been very rewarding working with these folks, and maybe giving them a few pointers that they might look back on a few years later and said, hey, I remember this session we had, we talked about process improvement or lean or forecasting, and I can use it a little bit.
Well, it's that practicality. I look back at my college career. My favorite instructor that taught an entrepreneur class owned 3 furniture stores, and had owned it for 30 or 40 years. He'd been there and done it. And what he shared was better than any book, any class. I mean, and it really sticks out 20 years, later. So I love what you're doing, Fred. Everyone's benefiting, the students benefiting. And to echo Greg's point and both of your points, all that young talent is making the industry so much better, not just in supply chain, but elsewhere. So I love it. All right. So let's dive into the first burning question, Greg and Fred. And Fred, I'm going to pose it to you first, Greg. I want you to piggyback, and then we'll see what our audience says about the burning questions in supply chain. First question, Fred, for you. Are supply chains in disarray?
Well, and I say no way. As the pandemic started now months ago, what are we, 8 months, 9 months into this now? And, early on when we started to see the shortages, and especially it's the shortages at retail that got the most,
right,
maybe the most notoriety, the toilet paper and the sanitizer and paper towels, et cetera. And so the news media jumped on that, and you started seeing articles, and on the 6 o'clock news, you would see the articles about supply chains are collapsing, supply chains are in disarray. And so I started accumulating the comments, and here are some of the articles, and here are some of the things. A Bloomberg article, coronavirus could cause collapse of the global supply chains. LA Times, rotting food, hungry masses, chaotic supply chains. Broken supply chains create noisy disruptions. Up next, the collapse of the global food supply chain. So it was like the sky is falling, and I frankly took great offense at that. So I work every day with supply chain professionals, and I knew what they were doing, and from our SAPICS education and the bullwhip effect and the beer game and all that, I knew exactly why we had issues like that. But our supply chains collapsing, and I say, what a bunch of hooey. That's one of my favorite new words. And it means nonsense if you look it up. So what a bunch of nonsense. So have there been shortages? Absolutely, and very much explainable by the bullwhip effect of as the demand and hoarding behavior and other reasons cause issues at retail, that cascades back through each part of the supply chain, back through the distribution function to distributors, back on the manufacturers, and all that increased demand cascades back through there. So have there been shortages? Absolutely. Do we expect to see hungry masses and rotting food? I don't think so, and we are better than that. And shame on Bloomberg and the LA Times for publishing that.
All right.
If only they were alone in that, right? I mean, there was a lot. Tom Raftery is on here. I'm sure he gets pinged by the press all the time. Scott and I spent days upon days answering questions about the disarray and the failure of the supply chain and toilet paper and whatever. How long is this going to last?
Right.
Look, the truth is, I think we have to acknowledge my favorite 3 words: seismic societal disruption.
Right.
What caused this was the virtual overnight shutdown of normal society across the world.
Mm-hmm.
So were supply chains in disarray? Undoubtedly. For the reasons noted and to the extent noted in the articles that Fred's talking about, absolutely not. Look, this is the biggest disruption that has ever occurred on the planet ever, right? Even the plague, right, or smallpox, which killed 300 million people, or other big disruptions, they didn't occur all at once. This isn't about the impact of the pandemic. This is about the impact of our response to it, and our response to it caused a lot of this disarray. However, I do think it exposed, because it was such a dramatic shift in supply and demand, it exposed, by virtue of the extreme nature of it, it exposed some inconsistencies, some inadequacies in the supply chain that I think we're all thankful for seeing. But they aren't systemic, they aren't foundational, and they don't spell the end of supply chain or society. And I think we've all discovered that over the last 9 months. Frankly, I think in the supply chain industry, there were a lot of rolling eyes and, just disbelief, right?
It's like Kelly Clarkson says, she sings, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. Yeah. And, for supply chains and supply chain community, the gaps and the challenges and the unforeseen, all that's illuminated throughout this pandemic environment, it's the silver lining here is going to make us stronger as a industry. So, Fred, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say you mentioned there our history of doing webinars, and I actually just did one a week ago with the SAPICS chapters in Memphis and Atlanta and Savannah, Georgia, and a couple of others. And a discussion came out of that about best practices during the COVID timeframe. And our John Dillingham, the president of the Memphis chapter, and our president in Savannah, and they got into a discussion about what they had done in their companies to respond to COVID. And hey, it has to do with collaboration and talking with each other and that sort of thing. And so I just sat there and I said, I wish the people from Bloomberg and LA Times could hear this conversation, and they would know supply chains are not in disarray.
We're never going to get anyone from Bloomberg and LA Times again, Greg and Fred.
Nah, who cares? Well, I mean, frankly, look, I think at the time I expressed the frustration, and I get it. I mean, they don't understand, and they have to sell newspapers. So when you don't understand, you hyperbolize to try and generate revenue. So I completely get it. They did their job the way they're supposed to do their job. It is frustrating. It is unethical in my opinion. But it's not universal, because, we talk to people who know supply chain at Bloomberg, not just Bloomberg Press, but their analysts and professional services division, like Lee Klaskow. That guy knows supply chain. They should have asked him before they published any of those articles. I mean, we've even had a discussion with Lee since that time.
That's right.
So, and he expressed essentially the same thing that we're all talking about here. It is frustrating to have the ignorant press rather than the industry press pontificating on items like this. But what can you do about it?
Right. All right. So we got 18 more burning questions I got to pose to y'all in the community. I want to take a few comments from the audience here. First off, Dr. Vias via India, great to have you here. Mamadou from Morocco, great to have you here as well. Tom says, yes, he's getting plenty of inquiries, Greg, as we expected.
Yeah.
a couple comments here. Michael Averitt says forecasting planning can't account for unexpected human behavior, i.e., freaking out in times of crisis. And hello, Keith Duckworth. Greetings from Michigan, home of Motown. Love it. And the big three. Let's see here. Keith Duckworth says the problem is sensational news sales. So the problems with the supply chain need to be sensationalized to sell and direct the narrative a certain way. Michael says there's a great book called The Quants that profiles and exposes how the human effect helped flame the fires during the 2008 financial crisis. Tom says there is an expression in the media, if it bleeds, it leads. Bad news.
Absolutely right.
Sensationalism sells. And one final comment from our dear friend Jenny Froome. Africa's in the house, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Morocco. Jenny, I'm with you. We love it. And looking forward to next week. Hope this finds you well. And Spain, Jenny. That's right, Tom. All right.
Hey, a quick note. I think the only missing continent is Oceania, unless there's somebody from Oz here. I think we're touching every continent. Oh, wait, maybe not South America. At least nobody from South America has commented. So if you're in South America or Oz,
give us a shout.
Sound off.
That's right. All right. So I'm loving this second question. We've talked about this on numerous shows. We talked about this with the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. We've talked about it all the way around. Are supply chains too lean, Fred Tolbert?
Well, and that sort of takes it down a level into almost the execution level of managing inventory. And so what is the JIT and lean effort to do is at its basic point is the elimination of waste, and certainly we've evolved to consider inventory or excess inventory certainly as waste of a company's assets. And so other people have pounced on shortages, and again, shortages at retail, to say, aha, we told you so. That concept of JIT or lean is flawed. We should lay in more inventory. We should keep more safety stock inventory, and the paper aisle at Publix being somewhat bare is a justification to say we should back off of what we spent 30 years developing good processes, and we should keep more and more inventory. So my response to that, more hooey. Absolutely nonsense that the response to having inventory issues is that we back away from the sound business processes that people have been developing. More hooey.
So Fred, it's interesting. Each time you say hooey, we're getting a thumbs up on some platform. It's almost directly tied.
Is that right?
So
that's pretty awesome.
So Greg, you weigh in. Let me preface. Let me just throw my little jab in. I think definition is so important. Definition in the context. And for years, lean has been misdefined by so many organizations and leaders. And we've all seen some articles where the definition they're using of lean was way off. But Greg, weigh in here.
I think it's been misdefined and misapplied. I think a lot of companies have called what they're doing lean, but they don't really understand and apply the principles, because the essence of supply chain is risk management. Nobody is running the risk of running out of stock, because we all know what happens when that happens, right? If you're in supply chain, when you're out of stock, it's your fault. When you're overstocked, it's your fault. And if anything happens to go right, it's thank God for that sales team. So we know that there is no win in supply chain. So the essence of supply chain is to avoid stockouts without breaking the bank. And, to think or simplify, or even to have practitioners, frankly, represent those goals incorrectly, it is also frustrating. But it's a fact. I mean, the principles did not fail us. As Fred said, the execution failed us. And arguably, by the way, the failure at retail has nothing to do with lean, because they don't use lean principles at retail, right? They don't use JIT. They don't use just-in-time inventory. They do have safety stock. And in many cases, they have presentation stock that sits on the shelf collecting dust just for the viewing pleasure of the consumer. So The real failure, for instance, at real retail, especially in grocery, who was hit hard, is that their processes are still manual. Someone still goes around, at least in the States. This is not true in Europe as much, but someone still goes around and counts the product, and either nowadays, at least they don't put it down on paper. They key it into a device, but it's still done manually. Somebody comes before your Coke is delivered and they count the shelf and tell the driver how much to bring the next day.
All right. So lots of opportunity, lots of misdefinition, lots of misapplication, and a ton of hot air across this. Our supply chain's too lean. Fred, before we move on to forecasting and planning, one of this panel's favorite topics, and the communities has really enjoyed it as well. Any final comments on burning question number 2?
The idea that we need more safety stock. Even at retail, I just saw a presentation the other day on TV that one of the home shipment companies are saying that retailers are this week, as there been a little bit of an uptick, they're seeing the demand for toilet paper up 200% over recent demand. I believe it was sanitizer up 300%, and the wipes up 400%. So how much safety?
Wow.
Yeah,
so 500%.
Could anyone imagine to cover demand like that? And one of the articles that I saw, and there's a professor at University of Louisville that said he went to Kroger and they're out of bleach. Those were obviously too lean, right? The whole point of inventory is a buffer against demand stocks. So clearly they failed there. And so in my area of Huey, and I only know one person, Mark Williams, who's one of our good SAPICS Atlanta chapter presidents, is a University of Louisville graduate. So I don't think I'm going to be offending anyone, at least that I know. That's the same place that hired Bobby Petrino and Rick Pitino. So I don't know, maybe something.
So you can gauge their judgment based on that. And I agree, Fred. Look, that was a once in a lifetime case. If you build your inventory to account for a once in a lifetime case, there's statistical analysis that goes into this. If you build your inventory for that once in a lifetime case, you will go out of business before the once in a lifetime case could ever occur, because you'll have the ultimate just in case inventory. Just in case every government in the world closes down the entire planet and sends everyone home from work within a 7-day span, we will carry 6 months, an average 6 months worth of product. That's ridiculous. So Tom, and it's irresponsible for a professor to speak that way.
Yes. Tom says visibility and resilience are what is needed, not more inventory.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk forecasting. One of our favorite words here. So Fred, can we forecast our way out of the pandemic?
Well, and so the short answer is absolutely not. Companies have invested a lot of time and effort and money into demand planning systems. That's kind of the term that forecasting has evolved into. But there's even within some people that there's an idea that there's a statistical solution to the demand swings that Greg was talking about, and 200-300%, 500% changes in demand, that there's a statistical algorithm that will respond to that. So as I've come to say, companies are looking for a forecasting solution to a planning problem. And I'm not sure that, us trying to say, can we statistically forecast, what's going to happen next month, not only next year, but just is the right approach to put more time and effort into the forecasting process. Obviously, we have to forecast, and that starts the supply planning process of having an estimate of demand. But to expect that we're going to solve our problems by forecasting better is probably at least an ill-advised and maybe frankly a naive view of what the expectations should be.
Greg?
First of all, we're not forecasting a pandemic. This pandemic has killed less than 2% of all people who have died this year. So it's not even the biggest impact on human health in the world. It is nonetheless impactful and scary because it's a pandemic, which a pandemic means it's its first time and there's no cure or vaccine. So I understand all of the reactions around that. But what we are really forecasting against, and if this doesn't drive the point home, I don't know what will. What we're really forecasting against is the response of political entities to the potential for human catastrophe, right? Because we have had far more people die in recent history. 300 million people, as I said, died of chickenpox over time. H1N1, over 160 million people got it, right? We've had far bigger health crises than this. It is the response that has caused this. And would anyone even want to attempt to predict what a government with political motivations is going to do? I don't think so. That is folly.
All right.
That is the ultimate. That is the ultimate reason to have resiliency and agility in your solution, but you can't forecast that.
So, all right. So let's take a few comments from the audience here. Michael Aver says you'll lose a ton of money. Great point, Greg. Finished goods inventory is the most expensive thing your company produces. David says exactly. Holding inventory is just a really expensive Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Michael Kinneman, great to have you back with us. You need to focus on processes as inventory is an outcome of your processes. If you want lower inventory, then drive waste out of the supply chain processes.
Michael, could you at least claim to be from Oz so we can say that?
That's right. All right. So Jenny, I'd love for you to clarify your comment there and get into the conversation. Great to have you here once again. Daria says, hey, even though the economy is recovering, we are seeing second and third wave of COVID in certain countries. Companies must adopt an agile approach and at the same time plan for recovery. That's a good point,
doubt.
Daria. All right. That's
the appropriate thing to do is that responsiveness, resiliency, agility, right? You can't forecast any of this.
That's right. All right. So we're going to move into the topic of supply chain bench strength. Fred, are you ready?
I'm ready.
So let's talk about not just how strong organizational supply chain bench strength is, but how critical that baking that into your operation is. Speak to that a bit, if you would, Fred.
Well, and I'm a proponent and someone that's a career SAPICS person and other things that hey, we should invest in the skills of our supply chain organization all the way through the organization, and just what is the bench strength of a company in their supply chain planning organization. I've used the analogy before of, and I certainly have clients that use our software that have $100 million in inventory, and if that was $100 million in cash, they would have Wall Street bankers, CPAs, they would have everybody micromanaging that cash inventory. But if it's in or cash asset, but if it's in inventory, they may entrust that with people that haven't been anywhere near as professionally trained in how to manage inventory and how to optimize inventory. So I am absolutely a proponent that we need to improve the bench strength of our supply chain planning professionals, and consider that the job of supply chain planning in my area, but supply chain planning, transportation, manufacturing operations are all professional job functions that you need to continue to enhance your skills, after the software training is over with.
Greg?
It is investing. because they are investing your $100 million in inventory. And I completely agree. The team should have exceptional analytics skills. They should have exceptional mathematics skills. They should have exceptional finance skills. Mm-hmm. And there should be adequate tools, I would argue, as well. Right? I mean, if you think about what kind of analytical tools and supports and academic assistance that Wall Street firms get to determine what stocks to invest in, it's not dissimilar with inventory. Yep. And companies, especially large companies with a lot of finished goods, need to support the team in the same way.
Yep. Well said. So Jenny had used the word naive earlier, and I was trying to figure out what she was referring to, and it could have been me. So I asked her to clarify, and she did. So Jenny, she points out, Fred, when you were searching for that term about where the power of the forecast, or maybe the lack of the power of the forecast, you kind of stalled for a word, and she wanted to add naive, and before she could add it, that's the word you use. There is a lot of while one of the silver linings, we've talked about this a lot, Greg. One of the silver linings is consumers are really understanding more about how supply chains work. Yeah, that's one of the silver linings of 2020 and the pandemic. That's great, but still, we all don't know what we don't know. I don't know anything about brain surgery, right? And we're all learning, and the consumers are learning, and it's a wonderful thing about why certain things take place. Why, what's behind getting something in 2 days or 1 day or 2 hours, right? And that will be one of the elements, I believe, that will help the industry get better as well, moving forward. All right. So
and I'll just add that, I don't think, people come to work and say, how can I really mess them up today? How can I really, how can I just see how much inventory I can get, or how bad can we make our service today? And so they do the absolute dead level best, given the tools and the priorities that they're given to them. So we should give them every opportunity and increase their skills. There's the old SAPICS saying that you hear about. An executive says, "Well, what if I train my people and they leave?" And then the answer is, what if you don't train them and they stay? That's the reason that we should improve our bench strength and make people's skills better, because I'm convinced that we do that because the company's performance will be better.
Yep. That's an oldie and a goodie for sure. One thing I do hope that consumers learn more and more about. And when I say consumers, that's all of us, of course, I'm including myself there. Returns and returns. Clearly, that's been a big struggle, and it's gotten even a bigger struggle in 2020 as things come back. And of course, in a pandemic environment, you're further challenged. And I really hope, especially with the continued explosion of e-commerce, that's not going to ever slow down ever, that we get smarter from the consumer side with returns. I mean, we expect it in this age to buy it and be able to send it right back. And that's a great thing. That's a wonderful thing. Empowers a consumer, but from a reverse logistics, sustainability, supply chain, you name it, it poses a great problem. But we'll tackle that more, Greg, on the reverse logistics series here in the new year. All right. So let's keep driving here. Here's a great one that we've gotten, Fred, just for you. This is put this in the maybe the business leader voice here. You hear a lot about, quote, ABC analysis doesn't apply to us. We sell to a big box store or a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something. All items are A items. And you just want to ask them, really, right?
Well, and I do. In that particular, that's a straight out quote from a client of mine. Frankly, worked at probably the worst supply chain company in America, that drove themselves, frankly, out of business. But with that, and in our training, and Greg, I had even heard you and maybe one of your former cohorts talking about having a stratified maybe 2-level ABC analysis and what it took to be. But we were having a training class on having the appropriate inventory planning parameters for certain levels of inventory that you need to set service levels one way for A items and changing assumptions for B items and C's. And that's where Lamar said, you just don't understand. They're all A items. And so that was his rationale for having all items set with their system parameters exactly the same. And so my response is trying to manage all items the same absolutely assures that you're either going to have too much of some or not enough of the other, but it's not going to accomplish the fact that you think it's important. Absolutely, it's important, and that it's just as bad to stock out of an A or a C as it is an A. That doesn't mean you try to manage them the same way.
Excellent point. And as David says, tell us how you really feel, Fred.
I love this.
Yes, I do too. Greg, you're
therapeutic, frankly.
Yes. How would you respond?
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. I mean, if you think about it, A items are super stable. Everyone buys WD-40 or whatever that fast moving item is. And the rule of large numbers means that demand is relatively stable. C items, if you were to give it the same number or even same days of supply in terms of safety stock, that would be a ridiculous amount of time supply, first of all. So yeah, of course it doesn't make sense. But again, that goes back, I think, to what Fred was saying about the teams before. The teams are not educated enough. In many cases, they're not educated enough on statistics or on the science or the math or the analytics to be able to refute that. So they are bowled over. And historically, they have been bowled over by the executives who have demanded these common sense. So at a company I worked at, Fred, you'll remember E3, way back in the day, we had a whole book, The Pitfalls of Common Sense, and this is one of them. This is one of the pitfalls of common sense, where common sense leads you completely astray.
Love it. Love it. That's such a great call out there, Greg, because there are so many pitfalls of common sense. What's always intuitive, as we all know, isn't the smartest thing to do or the next thing to do or the next or the best way to react or whatever. So it's a great call out. And if ever a year to challenge those pitfalls of common sense, 2020 has certainly taught us that.
Certainly that. Yeah.
All right. So Michael Aver says finance skills are critical. Almost everything everything I look at in supply chain goes back to a fixed or variable cost, so that we can determine a proper price for a desired margin. It's good stuff there. Keith Duckworth says the hardworking and dumb level of people, according to the Prussian officer matrix, as stated yesterday.
That's what if we don't train them and they stay, right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. T-Squared is with us. I think you hit a chord with him, Fred, with ABC analysis. David, going back to your point about these A items, what is the point of even having a system if that's the case? He also says all you need is duct tape or WD-40 to fix anything, Greg White. If it moves and shouldn't, use duct tape. If it doesn't move and should, use WD-40. I love that.
David has worked on a farm before, obviously.
Yes. All right. So let's see. For the second time, I've got about 10 till. I want to skip it. We've got a couple of burning questions that we're not going to be able to get to, but we're gonna have to have you back, Fred. You always bring it and tell us how you really feel, which is really valuable in today's age. All right. So Fred, let's talk about what are some of the things you're listening to, gaining insights from. What are some things that excite you about where the industry is headed?
Well, I mean, short of being frankly energized working with professionals and seeing how they're dealing with the pandemic in what is, definitely tough situations, but dealing with people that are applying sound techniques to that. I enjoy doing this work every day. Seeing the people that are coming up and the skills that the new generation of supply chain pros have. Boy, I sure look at that. Hey, there's a new there's a lot going on in the industry right now, and I know it's Corinne Bursa's one of her topics of the whole area of the digital new wave of digital technology that's coming about, and I think we're really just at the leading edge of that. But here comes analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning, that they're going to be the wave of the future. And out of that, I especially think analytics is really, on a day-to-day basis, what is maybe the new thing or the hot topic of, for all these years, we've had report writers and BI tools and reporting and that sort of thing. But we're in a whole new ball game now with dashboards and exception reporting. And as that transitions into machine learning capabilities, I think the next 5 years is going to see an explosion in the application of that. I mean, it's been out there somewhat in an academic environment, or the really leading edge companies, the really large companies. But I work more in the mid-market type companies that may not have those kind of tools today, but I think over the next few years, those kind of analytics and pricing optimization and other kind of techniques filtering down into the mid-market type companies.
Yeah, talking about the game has changed. I love a good sports analogy, and you look at what's going on in the baseball realm. Back when Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux, and John Smoltz even were in the Braves rotation, it was an exception when a guy threw 95 miles an hour as a starter and could hold that for 7 innings. That was a rare thing. Nowadays, a pitcher or even reliever that throws 95 is so commonplace.
Right.
And that game has changed a lot, and batters have had to catch up to that, and still are in many cases. And then the other thing is we're measuring with the rise of sabermetrics. We're measuring performance. We're measuring and evaluating the players and the games and the teams much differently. There's a ton of relevance there to what's going on in supply chain, how we're evaluating performance, and how we're optimizing, and how do we optimize? There's, with some of the visibility and the digital transformations that are taking place out there, we're changing that equation even. So not only are we having to move faster because consumers are expecting it, but we're measuring how we that performance differently as well. Greg, I know you're also in the boat with me about a good sports analogy, and we may not be able to continue that one on too far. But what are some of your thoughts there?
I think we've got to really focus on what the future is going to bring us and how we address that. I think there's so much in supply chain that we need to move away from, and so much in supply chain that we need to move toward. And I think Fred, frankly, Fred has exposed to us both of those things, right? There are some presumptions that we need to move away from, and there are some opportunities that we need to move toward. And I'm thinking about this entire conversation, this entire discussion, and I think what it has really reinforced in my mind is that we all do recognize the pitfalls. We do recognize the failings of supply chain, but we recognize them in proportion to their measure, not in proportion to hyperbole, right? We know that forecasting isn't perfect. We know that lean isn't perfect. We deal with the imperfect and the disruptive every single day. It's not a surprise to us. So I think that's what I think is the biggest lesson here, is that we can all take pride and warning and an action bias away from this, to acknowledge that we are used to dealing with disruption, and we are good at it, and we expect it. And that's why, to go back to the first question, that's why supply chains are not in disarray. That's why I think many of us as we were talking about this new uplift in demand of 1 or 2 or 500% uplifts on certain products, why some of us were going, so what? The last time we saw this, it was 786%, literally overnight. So what's 500% over a few weeks? We're ready for that now.
Yeah. So, so much good stuff there. We need a second hour to dive into some of these things and pose more questions. But Fred, let's make sure our audience knows how to connect with you. I can't believe this hour has flown by as fast as it has. How can folks connect with you offline?
Well, very easy to track me down on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people and seeing the posts and the conversations that go along there. That's the best way to reach me on LinkedIn, Fred Tolbert. I mean, email ftolbert@demandsolutions.com. Easy, but hey, just hit me up on LinkedIn and we'll be in good shape.
Love that. Fred, always love what you share here. You've been there and done that expertise. That is so valuable.
He's being there and doing that, right? I mean, with companies today. So that, I mean, that's powerful stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And loved all the comments. I wish we'd get to all of them. Y'all know we'll keep going. We'll hope to see y'all on Monday's Buzz. But thanks so much, Fred Tolbert, principal with Southeast Demand Solutions. We look forward to having you back again real soon.
Right. Great.
Yeah. Thanks, Fred.
All right, Greg. Some of these questions we couldn't get to. Who really owns the inventory in a company? Why is our forecast accuracy so bad? Things that we hear all the time. A lot of folks are wondering, right? But we'll have Fred back, one of our favorite guests, and really appreciated what he shared here today. All right, so Greg, what a week! Another week of live streams. I think 3 or 4 seems like, and a full week of production, but so much good stuff and so much.
And it's only Thursday.
It's Thursday. That's right. It's not Friday. But calling Jenny's point out, and there's so much that I think this comment could be pointed to, but that's why supply chains make the world. I'm with you, Jenny. We expect there to be problems. We expect us to have to put something in a headlock and get it done, because the consumer's paying for it, right? They want it on time. They want it right price, all that good stuff. And that's why supply chain expertise, real expertise, is so important, regardless of what industry you're in. So a lot of good stuff. Greg, before we sign off here, I'm going to get your favorite. Give me one favorite thing that Fred shared here today.
Hooey. Seriously, I love the fact that he spoke with passion and anger about hyperbole and ignorance and intentional, I think, in some cases, intentional misdirection. And I'm glad he used the word hooey. I'm not sure that naive was the first word he was looking for. But I'm glad he selected it. But no, I think that is a good point. And I'm glad that he's that passionate about it, because he's living in it every single day, which is not something that all of us can say anymore.
Agreed. Right? Well, you and Fred and many of our commenters have one quality in that you share, and that is the ability, when something's hooey, you call it hooey. And that
you have to. That's the industry we live in, right?
That's right. You got to.
You can't hide anything, because eventually it's exposed in overstocks or out of stocks. One of the two. So
love it. I want to share a couple comments and then we're going to sign off. Tom Raftery says, laziness properly channeled can be an asset, Keith. I love that.
I'm living on it right now, Tom.
Keith Duckworth says, this is why many military veterans are perfect for working in civilian careers that are constantly in a state of flux and disruption. Keith, absolutely.
Making instantaneous life and death decisions with inadequate information is what enables military veterans to be so strong in so many industries, but certainly in supply chain.
Agreed. Let's see here. Michael also agrees with that. Exactly, Keith Duckworth. Numbers are a starting point that shows where there are problems or where there are opportunities. But then the real work starts by working backwards to solve those issues or capitalize on opportunities. David says identifying issues is only step one. All right. So much good stuff there. Greg, a pleasure. The webinar was so informative and enlightening on the front end, especially if you're not a non-technologist like I am. I think we're all technologists these days, but I don't implement IoT systems. I'm curious and learning about Industry 4.0 like many folks in our audience. If that's you, check out this webinar. It will be posting by our friend Bob Slavin at Open Text. It was outstanding. Got a lot of good feedback just in the couple hours since we wrapped it. And then I've gotten a couple notes. Folks have joined us here kind of midway through the live stream, and they want to go back and watch the front end. Got to do that because Fred Tolbert, as always, says it like it is, and you need to hear.
I love
what he shares. We're all better off.
Yep.
All right. So, Greg, pleasure. Look forward to our next live stream, which will be the Buzz on Monday at 12 noon. Always standing live streams Monday and Thursday at 12 noon. Always a pleasure. To our community, hey, thanks so much for showing up and showing out. You always do. You're so consistent. Really appreciate that. They were there with us on the webinar. Ton of outstanding questions posed to Bob.
Yeah.
And it continues on live stream. So with all that said, hey, be sure to check out our podcast, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Check out our website. We got a new one in the works, in the gun works. I'm just messing with you.
I know. I can see that.
But hey, check out our new website soon. Can't wait. We're going to make finding content so much easier. We've gotten great feedback from the market. We're going to act on it. So stay tuned for that. But most importantly, that's
second most importantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do good.
Most importantly, go.
Give forward. And be the change that's needed. Be like Fred Tolbert, giving back, helping, powering that next generation is going to make industry so much better. So be like Fred. And with that said, Scott Luton, Greg White, on behalf of the entire team, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.